Okay. So, good evening, and I will start thanking, I don't know if I have to thank Alessandro Piccolo, because as I will show, it's supposed to pop. I've dealt with economy or administrative text in the last 20 years. I always avoided any approach to economy, economics, microeconomy, and I preferred always an anthropological and sociological perspective on the topic, but Alessandro obliged me to delve into this, and have also to thank Antonella, because I found the exchange of ideas, even were few in before this meeting, very exciting. As Antonella said, for antiquity, I would say about economics, microeconomy, and macroeconomy, I know very few. So I hope you will excuse some problems, general of terminology and concept I will use. Second, for the colleagues from ancient Near East and Egypt, of course, this will be a large overview over 3 millennia of society, culture, and economy of ancient Near East, as there was no changes in space and time. So it's a kind of simplification of the matter, but was only to provide a series of basic data, basic ideas to develop the dialogue. I introduce here with some references showing the interest of older economists on the discoveries from the ancient Near East. This is quoted after the introduction of Ciocca to a monographic number of Rivista di Storia Economica, mentioning the interest of Keynes in the discovery of the cuneiform tablets that emerged from letters to Lydia Lopokova. Keynes was studying the administrative texts from ancient Mesopotamia, convinced that this will improve a better understanding of economy. And then I like it very much, but this is on the sociological point of view, the report of Weber that insisted that capitalism, we can discuss about this, of course, also what is capitalism, and competition is very interesting. Capitalism is present everywhere, and in his introduction to the, can't remember in German or English, but the volume, The Protestant Ethic and the Spirit of Capitalism, Weber starts from the basic idea that capitalism is present in every society. So he said this is in Egypt, Mesopotamia, China, India, but I will deal with modern theory of capitalism. So in the past year, there were a series of interests toward the economy. I have to remember the long collaboration of Banca d'Italia with Odoardo Bulgarelli and other functionaries, also Ciocca, with mainly with Professor Pomponio, and also other initiatives, in particular the creation of the Centro di Ricerca Interdisciplinare sull'Economia del Vicino Oriente Antico, Crevola, in Messina, thanks to the colleague Annunziata Rositani. So the acts of the first meeting were published. Thanks to the collaboration with Banca d'Italia, also a number of the Rivista di Storia Economica were devoted to not really a dialogue, because were Assyriologists dealing with economic topics. So it was never a dialogue, it was a kind of presentation of economic issues. Another volume, always yet with Banca d'Italia, by Lucio Milano and Nicola Parise. Other works outside Italy, very important, the work of Michael Jurza, that will participate to these seminars in Vienna, but also Robertus van der Speck and others. or Gojko Baramovic and Ramstorff and so on. So in all these cases, they are mainly ancient historians dealing with economic topics or economic theory. An important volume has been published by mainly by French scholars, but also with German participants about Polanyi in 2015 or something like this. So a relecture of Polanyi. So the interest is mutual, I would say. So I hope this dialogue will improve the relationship. First, before I introduce the topic, I liked, mainly for the colleague and the other economists, to point at two aspects on dealing with ancient near-East that it works also for ancient Egypt. One is the idea that seen from outside, the ancient near-East is an unchanging Orient. I quoted here also for a famous book, The Unchanging East, as the economy during the 3 millennia and in all part of ancient Near East was the same as the government. So it's a kind of block, as Marx and also Wittfogel and others analyzed. So there's no changes in 3 millennia, which is not so, because when we have enough sources, we can see a change even year by year, as in the case of Ebla. The second are a kind as Marco and I think Antonella had no time to criticize her own discipline. This is from the inside, a criticism. Many is the centrality of the text. I will speak, of course, ancient Near East in historical time. So the text is the reflex of a reality. So what is in written sources is what is in the real life. What is not does not exist, and I will show you that this involves also some judgment in theory also for economy. And then 2 points that I like to call Assyriologist mania and Assyriologist syndrome. The Assyriologist mania is mostly the mania that have most philologists. I translate, so I am the only one that understand what is happening in an ancient society. So if an anthropologist, a sociologist, or someone else come, he will never understand as I understand ancient Mesopotamia. And this involves this opinion, like Scarlock say, and I quote, infected anthropologists waste endless time in useless arguments over which of a variety of terms, which are all too often essentially identical, are the scientifically correct ones, which technically is what they call nominalism. You change the name, but it's always that phenomena that I can understand reading the text without any theoretical approach or basic. She continues, but you can read. She becomes harsher toward the anthropologists that lose hour and their time in these things. The Assyriologist syndrome, which has been criticized also in a meeting in Banca d'Italia, is that the abundance of the written sources, mostly unpublished, led to a kind of reticence or like fear to give general statement, like, is this normally Assyriology? This is probably, maybe, because if they publish other archives, they discover the situation can completely change. This is also reflected in the fact that till 10 years ago, there were no synthesis on the ancient Near East. No historical synthesis, apart from Liverani and the other, but then with the handbook from Oxford and Cambridge started to publish. But the idea is always, could be, but. That said, very quick geographical and historical set. We are speaking largely on culture or several cultures that developed from the 3rd to the 1st millennium BCE. Of course, it's called Ancient Near East, Ancient Mesopotamia, as is a unity, but we know it's not so. There are important diachronical and also synchronical, so geographic differences. An important point of change that is also the mark of the beginning of history in the ancient history, ancient Mesopotamia, is the so-called urban revolution, when, according to Child and the main theory, we move from a village communal society to what is called the city, with all a series of elements. So the city has a structure, walls, big organization, hierarchy, differentiation of work, and always we insist on writing that is created to keep administrative texts, not for a romantic purpose, but only for administration. I would like to stress something that, in my opinion, is not sufficiently highlighted, is the abstraction that this revolution involved. Because in writing, we have the passage from a 3D, you have the object, physical, or you have the token, an object that replied that good, to something which is written on a clay tablet. Okay, so you have the sheep, now is completely abstracted. You don't have the animal, you don't have the token, but you have something on a medium which, if you don't know how to read it, does not exist anymore. The second is the process of creating weight and measures. So an idea of ruling and rationalizing the nature and geomet, among which also the creation of calendar, and things that might be interesting for an economic discourse, the creation of relationship on abstract things, like day work, wages, and labor. So in administrative texts, we start to have a number of day works. I have 6 workers that worked for a number of days, and I know how much I have to pay or to give them for that. So this is all part of a process of abstraction. Of course, all along this 3 millennia, we have the passage to city-states, states, empires, with a series of problems on the terminology and agreement around this. Usually, it is mentioned that the so-called the great organization, the palace of the temple, that own most, if not all the lands, are the 2 main actors in economy, particularly for the earlier period, for the 3rd millennium. And the other problem is the nature of the sources, which is not secondary, particularly for an economic discourse, meaning that the main idea is that the archives of the 3rd millennium give an idea of a mainly big organization economy. Sometimes someone, but this is an extreme position that now is abandoned, there is the idea that no private lands, no private property exists, while at the beginning of the 2nd millennium, the old Babylonian private archives show that exists private economy. This is mainly, however, due to a positivistic approach to the sources, meaning if it is written, it exists. If it is not written, does not exist. Meaning also that if we don't have private administrative archive in 3rd millennium, so there is no private economy. But there are some caveats. First of all, is an oral culture, and writing documents are not mandatory. So are mandatory in a big organization, but we know, for example, that for sale contracts, marriages, we don't have enough number of texts dealing with this, meaning that the normal way was the oral contract with rituals and so on. So the absence of private administrative text does not mean that there was no private economy. And then a very trivial aspect is that the archaeological excavation concentrated on palace and temples and didn't excavate private houses. So we have only Palatine, palatial, and Templar archives. So what about the economy? I think this is interesting. Normally, Mesopotamia is described as an agriculture economy. Cereals, mainly barley, is the main culture, with other culture, really interesting because they need more technical knowledge, skills, like the date palm and so on. The cereals allow a surplus. We have a lot of studies on the number of seed for sowing and seed obtained after the harvest, which is very high. So the idea is that this surplus from the barley cultivation is used to create, is exchanged in goods that are then trade with other countries abroad and so on. This is the general idea. Another important point that we can discuss, but I think there is no solution, it's also a discussion on terms, but which has been the topic of several studies, is the state of the land, the property of the land. So as I said, one idea is that the great institution, the palace and the temple owns everything, everything. But I almost completely, not almost, I completely agree with Van de Mierop, who produced an interesting synthesis in a chapter on economic history, that we have to assume that at least 3 levels of state property of land existed. So there were clearly the palace and the temple, then what we call private, and we will discuss who these private are at the end of the presentation, and then the communal owning of the temple, which normally is related to villages. So in the city, you have the big organization, and the villages have this communal, let's say, ethnological approach to the land, which is communal. This idea that the pillar of the economy in Mesopotamia is agriculture is true, of course, but normally in synthesis, it is not considered a relevant fact that most of the trade, the exchange, and also the redistribution system is based on the wool economy. So they produce agriculture, but when they trade abroad, and also when they give gift rations to the officials and the priests, these are mainly wool and wool products. Here I've given you some ideas of how much we know about the wool economy. This is a biannual trend of 3 of the main ugula overseer of textile industry in the province of Umma. So it's clear that the range is biannual, so there is a high production, then low, high and low. We have the amount of wool produced and textile, and we have also for Umma, I know Umma because it has been one of my researches with Gabriela Spada. We know we have all the documents, and we know how to work all the process. So the wool is provided by the shepherds. It is combed, and Ikalla is the main official, receive the wool, give to the weavers that have to weave. Then Ikalla takes back the textiles, gives to the fullers, also the chemical to do the appreto and the rest. And then finally, Ikalla received the final product. Each time Ikalla receives the product, wait and measure how many product has been lost during the work to the working process. At the end, all these textiles, they could be textiles or dress or garments, it is not clear, are given to temple and palaces and distributed to officials, functionaries. So it is a redistributive system. This work for Ebla as well, work for all the third millennium larger Mesopotamia. So we have to consider, but it's not a problem of economists, it's more a problem of ancient historian, how to deal with pastoralism in earlier phases. Probably in the third millennium, we not yet have specialized personnel that manage the flock, meaning that we don't have the nomadic shepherds. It's an agro-pastoral system, meaning that the same temple and palace, they manage the grazing of the flocks. At some point during the third millennium, some people become specialized, become shepherds, and become also nomadic, mobile shepherds. But this is another issue. Here I dealt with some point we can discuss and for which we have evidence. I mean, I'm sorry, I put economy or economic, I didn't know how to. One point is that of money. I think it's very interesting historically how money has been defined, the different position on what is money from antiquity till now. For ancient Mesopotamia, what we know is that the two parameters for of value is silver and barley, meaning the barley grain is the minimum and the silver mina is the maximum. So you can have prices or exchanges or values based on these two parameters. One interesting point that Bulgarelli raised is this silver, which is given in sale contract, you will give, I don't know, 10 minas of silver for the house, for the slave, is real or is just a value concept, a parameter? So you will give a good that has the value of 10 mina, which is not a silly question because Bulgarelli asked how many silver circulated in Mesopotamia. Mesopotamia has no mines at all, so all the silver is imported. So are we dealing with something which is, say, a concept, the value of the silver, or physically there is circulation of silver for payments? Yes. Yes. No, before the 6th century, there's no money. So I'm sorry, it's a pre-monetary culture. So all the so-called payment prices are given normally in silver or barley. So there's no money. No coins, thank you. Yeah, I figured. Yes, no coins. However, even if we don't have coins and we don't accept the expression of payment or price, normally for payment is used the verb weighing, to weight, pesare, weighing. We have sale contracts that show that things were sold and bought. Since the very beginning of the sources, from the Phara period, at the beginning of the third millennium, we have sale of lands, sale of humans, or slaves, and so on. So you cannot say that there is no private economy. We can define what is private economy, but there is the chance to buy and to sell, or to acquire if you don't want to say to buy. It has been discussed a lot, the existence or not of markets, both in a physical term, a place where you can buy stuff, both in a concept of markets. I think it exists because it is present in all types of literature, for example, in divinatory texts. Of course, it is not the modern concept of market, but in divinatory texts, they say the market will grow, the market will low. Of course, it's an idea of crisis when the market grow is good, when the market low, there's no goods available. Very important and interesting are the debts and loans. Michael Hudson that will will be present in these seminars, edited a volume with Mark van der Meer, very important, about debt and economic renewal in the ancient Near East. We know that individual can become slave, or a term that we translate slave, when they cannot repay their debts. This led to what has been analyzed by Liverani. The idea is that at the end of the third millennium, we have a lot of people that cannot survive with their work, so they start selling the field, their own field, and they go to work their field for the new owner. So we have this landowner. Then they sold the wife, the son, and at the end they sold themselves, and then become serf or slave. And also on this, there is a lot of discussion on terminology. Interesting, but I cannot deal a lot, are loans. We have several loans since the third millennium. Most of these loans have an interest, a percentage, and they have been studied for the variation. But more interesting, for what we will say, are loans with no interest, which are similar in the shape in the text to the loan with interest. So some dynamics intervene, and maybe I will mention in the last one of the last. So the main problem here in the interpretation of economy, I would like to avoid the late and the second first millennium economy, because there is coin, there is the Persian Empire, Hellenistic, Babylonia is not the same of the previous one. Let's say one point, if the actors that I will show you soon act for profit. I know this could be silly to you, but it's a problem. I mean, it's a primitive economy where the actors act only to provide a good and not to gain money, silver, or profit to cure. One of the topic is consciousness and unconsciousness. So they are doing some action because they know they will gain profit, or they do this because it happens that they have profit. And this leads also to two different extremes, approaches, which are primitivist against modernist. In few words, modernists are those people, those scholars who believe that you can apply modern economic theory, but I think more dangerous modern economic terms to ancient societies, to the primitivists that say, no, this is a complete different economy, which is similar to the opposition of anthropologists against economy. So the one who believes that economy of ethnographic communities is a completely different matter from the modern economy. So these are the two extremes. Sorry, just to give you an idea, for example, there is a volume of ledgers and prices by Daniel Snell. He collected all the price of the sale contract and tried to also to study how these prices, if you like the term prices, or the value of the sold goods, a house, a man, a donkey. Extreme, because it's a really modern approach, is Alice Slotsky, the Bourse of Babylon. But she relies on more interesting and more later period documents, where really you can say there is a concept of bourse, because the astronomical diaries and the Gollier text of first millennium Babylonia, you have day by day or week by week the value of 1 grain of barley and 1 mina of silver. So they keep track of how is moving the value of these goods. And she also thinks you can reconstruct a kind of bourse and so on. So let's go to some examples, and I will mention some about the actors, economic actors, and I just close with a few conclusions. This is one of the most typical example when speaking about economy and profits is the trade system of all the Syrian colonies. So there are colonies in Anatolia where a Syrian merchant from North Mesopotamia have their carum, portifranchi, port, a harbor, technically. They exchange textiles coming from Babylon and tin coming from Iran for silver and gold from Anatolia. So Assur take the tin from Iran, take the textiles from Babylonia, send it to the Karum, to the port, to the in Kanesh. Kanesh is the most known. And here it exchanged mainly for silver and gold. Silver and gold are sent to Assur and continue all this system. None of these products are of primary economic subsistence relevance. So they are all luxury goods, we would like to say. So it's a purely profit trade. It's interesting also that the wives remain in Assur to manage the Assur activities, and normally the husbands are in Kanesh, receives from Assur the goods they sell and they send it back. So the idea is, okay, in this case, also the role of the king is very interesting because he's a king that has only to assure that everything works. It intervenes only if a treaty, an agreement is broken, or thieves menaces the trade. So it's very peculiar. This leads to the idea that from the second millennium spread the private property. However, even if the documents are far less respect to the Palatine and Templar economy, Stephen Garfinkel has produced a series of articles and I think a very brilliant, interesting volume called Entrepreneurs and Enterprise in Early Mesopotamia, showing that these dynamics were already present in the third millennium in Urtri period. This merchant lends money to other merchants only for profit. And all the system is based mainly on profit. So we can discuss what profit is, how is used, but let's say that they are conscious what they are doing. They are giving more silver to another person, not just because they like them, but it's a really administrative issue, an economic transaction. So the merchant, of course, are the most easy actor to isolate and study because they deal with goods, silver. More problematic, and we come to our problem, are the individuals, the mass. We don't have relevance for individuals, also because when individuals speak, normally are elite people. When we have literature, the right sufferer, il giusto sofferente, complaining about his issues, is not normal people, is a nobleman, a high society. So we know very few about the large masses. We know a little bit more about the elite or the elites, also deciding if is one elite or several elites, and so there is a struggling and other dynamic. This is evolved. This is studied in elite theory. If there is one elite, more elite, how they work. What is interesting is that this elite is develop a system of redistribution. So gifts are normally issued by the king or other structure to this elite in different way, like participation to a banquet or distribution of textiles. Is not for all the population. Is only for the pyramid, for the peak of the pyramid. They have access at wealth and also at goods which are hampered or limited for other. They have access to charges, important roles, honors, and what is more important, and this is an issue in Mesopotamia, are the prebends. So rights related to a function, mainly piece of land that the temple or the palace give to someone because he is the priest of, I don't know, the god or the goddess, and these prebends become inherited and then become a private property, and this is an important issue in ancient Mesopotamia. Three phenomena must be related to elite. First of all, land ownership. It is clear that at the end of the third millennium, this phenomenon that Liverani explained of people selling their field because they could not afford anymore, there's other people that gather and start to increase their wealth by owning many land. I will deal with the social aspect in the last slide. Second, and I don't know how much it has been stressed in our studies, trade is mainly a system to provide luxury goods, not primary goods of subsistence. The trade is for importing stone, metals, and precious woods from Iran, Anatolia, from the Gulf. And this is so for the gods, for the king, and for the elites. So these elites have the power, in a different way, to convince the mass that they have to produce the surplus, and this surplus has to be used converted in other goods that have to be traded, not for the wellness of everyone, but only for luxury goods for elite, king, and gods. The second, not secondary, is the control of culture and medium that we see in many objects, expressing the grandeur of the elite and the king. So also this object, which is an ostrich egg, which is already a precious good, covered with gold, lapis lazuli from the Badakhshan, is an effort of the community in exchanging the surplus, but is only for the elite. And we found it in the elite tombs and things like this. In this context, where we have a mass, like a big sea, about we see only the surface, not the rest. The elites a crucial role, and this is my last slide before the conclusion, is that of the king. I think, this is my idea, we discussed it with Alessandro, that something that has never been stressed properly is the role of the king as mediator of elite people and of economy and political issues within the society. I say this because, for example, at some point, the king or his advisor is aware that something is happening with land ownership. So there's a mass of people that own nothing to survive, no fields, and intervene with some political tools like the remission of debts. Normally at the beginning of the kingdom, there is a remission of debts, so no one has debts. The fact that it is repeated show that is an ineffective measure, but at least show that the king present himself and maybe play the role of a mediator, try to keep the society together with this intervention. We can think about the loans issued mainly by temples, but maybe also from palace, that loans without interest could be a support tool at the moment of sowing, giving seeds to people who are, let's say, in the limit of becoming a slave or selling the field, and so on. another interesting point is the fact that not only the king, I have to say, in Mesopotamian laws and evidence, also the community can use the treasure of the temple to provide, to fix a moment of crisis, use the goods to do some things. And another passage that once we discussed it with the colleague of Lucia Mori is the choices that the king or elites can impose in, I said, economic policy, but I don't know, maybe there is another term. For example, simply deciding to provide more water to a culture instead of another. So making choice. We know we have this reference. So making choice in what is it has to be done at level of state. Something that I would like to throw like the stone, which as far as I know, never discussed properly, is the status of royal properties. So-called crown, the property, the lands of the crown, is the property of the crown, is the property of the king, so it's related to the person or to the charge, and how a king can deal with this lands. Because we have some cases, like in the old Akkadian period, where one of the main problems of the king are veterans of war, like in Roman Empire, I veterani. So people who work, who has been soldiers, so when they retire, then they gave lands. These lands are part of the crown property, but the king can manage as a personal property, or it's a kind of institution. How free is the king to use this property? In conclusion, the idea for the Assyriologists to have a positivist approach, simply reading the text and giving an interpretation according to personal impression, is often opposed to theory, as Scarlock showed, that as anthropologists just change terms to confuse the things. The best thing is to merge the two approaches, because of course, one point correct of Scarlock is that trying to fit a model often lend to make a violence on the text. So I have a model and I try to fit my data with but the opposite is an error. I mean that everyone can read the text and say something about economy or religion without knowing nothing about theory, models, or dynamics of their field. As for the economy, some question arise from my personal point of view. One is if the economy or economics or microeconomy works only for modern industrial globalized Western societies, and if it is so, shall we have to create different models and concepts for other economies? If not, do economy or economics or microeconomic point to be a general science in historical sense that can also fit other period, other area? And of course, the idea, the base is to agree on common concept and terminology. So what is a money? It's coin, it's profit, payment. Doesn't mean that we have to agree on everything, but if similar phenomena can be identified as similar, we have to use the same models and system. As for, I'd like to show Professor of Sapienza, Federico Melis, that between the 60s and the 80s tried to use, I think successfully, tried to use Aegean, Egyptian, and Mesopotamian sources. He was more interested in accounting rather than economy, and particularly how capitalism can be detected on administrative texts. But it has been, as far as I know, completely forgotten. So the question for ancient Mesopotamia, as ancient Egypt, or as a matter of dialogue is, can we isolate or identify economic actors, agents? Can we deline, can we highlight, can we extrapolate market dynamics, not only descriptions, a marketplace, or the fact that, for example, we have text of people from one city that goes to buy slaves in another city. Are they cheaper? So also, not only to describe, but to analyze this. This is a crucial point, that because we go in another level. According, does it exist for ancient Mesopotamia? I don't want to mention Egypt, I know, a demand and supply system. Can everyone goes and try to buy or choose, as you were saying, Antonella, the best price or the best quality? Is this freedom in ancient Mesopotamia? Last point, and I conclude, because I think was my personal opinion, of course, one flow of Warburton presentation and Angelo Colonna make a mention is the role of technology. Technological change, which was completely denied by David Warburton. I don't know, maybe need more time to explain. But of course, when, for example, they introduced the change with metals, that involve also, for example, with Iron Age, different production of objects like the shearing scissors or points of arrows, which are more effective than the bronze one. There is a change. You cannot deny that economy continue without things. And this involves also technology to water management, to any type of things. I hope I gain some ideas to discuss, and I thank you.